She was 7 years old, a black child, gap-toothed smile, pink backpack with cat ears, a pocket full of strawberry candy that she carried everywhere, because she liked to give them to people who looked sad. She was just waiting for her mother, in a lobby she had walked through 100 times before. And then a woman stepped off the elevator, a woman draped in Chanel, carrying a Birkin bag that cost more than most people's rent, and she looked at that little girl. Not at the elevator, not at the space, at her. And she pointed, and she said, slowly, patiently, as if explaining something obvious to someone beneath her, "Use the service stairs. That's what they're there for." The lobby stopped breathing. But what no one in that marble lobby knew, what Charlotte Ashford-Wells could not have possibly calculated in her 11 years of untouchable privilege, was who had just walked through the door behind her. A man the entire city feared. Tall, Korean, tattooed neck, a suit that cost more than her monthly rent, eyes that didn't carry anger, they carried something worse. Absolute attention. He owned the building. Every floor, every elevator, every rule she thought protected her, and he had heard every single word she said. What happened next, what that little girl did with a single piece of strawberry candy, what that powerful man did in response, and what Charlotte Ashford-Wells lost in the next 90 days, will leave you speechless. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. There are buildings that don't just house people, they hold them. The Haneul Tower rose 39 floors above the Upper East Side like a quiet declaration. Glass and steel and imported marble, the kind of structure that costs more to maintain in a single month than most families earn in a year. Its name meant sky in Korean, and like the sky, it seemed to belong to everyone who looked at it, and to no one who actually needed it. Naomi Carter had worked inside that sky for 6 years. She arrived every morning at 7:15, 15 minutes before her contract required, and she left every evening after she had walked every floor she was responsible for, checked every report, spoken to every member of her staff by name. Not by title, by name. She knew that Cecil, in maintenance, had a daughter starting college in the fall. She knew that Wesley, at the front door, took his coffee with 2 sugars and a memory of a war he never talked about. She knew the building the way a surgeon knows a body, not just its surfaces, but its pressure points, its rhythms, the places where something small could become something catastrophic if left unattended. What she did not know, what she had spent 6 years choosing, quietly and deliberately, not to know, was how many of the people she kept comfortable every single day had never once learned her last name. She was Naomi, the administrator, the one you called when the heat stopped working at 2 in the morning, the one who appeared, solved it, and disappeared before you had to feel grateful. That Thursday in October, she was standing near the East Corridor reviewing a maintenance report when she heard the small, familiar sound of wheels on marble, the particular rhythm of a rolling backpack with cat ears and a unicorn keychain, and she looked up just in time to see her daughter push through the side door. Lily was 7 years old and operated with the absolute confidence of someone who had never been made to feel that she did not belong somewhere. She knew Wesley's name. She knew which elevator buttons lit up the slowest. She knew that the orchids at the front desk were changed on Mondays and Thursdays, and she had once asked the florist, very seriously, whether the old orchids were sad about being replaced. She was missing a front tooth. She had been missing it for 11 days and was still announcing this fact to anyone who had not yet been informed. She found her mother, took her hand, and they moved together toward the main elevator, the same elevator Naomi used every day, the same one every resident of the Haneul Tower used, the same polished brass doors that had opened and closed 10,000 times without anyone thinking to ask who deserved to stand inside them. The doors opened, and Charlotte Ashford-Wells walked out. She was the kind of woman who filled a room not by being loud, but by making everyone else in the room quietly aware that they were being evaluated. 11 years in the penthouse. 11 years of knowing, without having to say it, that her presence in any shared space was the standard against which all other presences were measured. She wore Chanel and carried a Birkin and smelled of a perfume that cost more per bottle than some people's rent, and she moved through the lobby of the Haneul Tower the way she moved through everything, as though it had been built specifically to frame her. She looked at Naomi. She looked at Lily. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not rage, not cruelty even, not the dramatic, conscious kind. Something quieter and more dangerous than that. The reflex of a woman who had never been asked to examine it. She pointed, not at the elevator, not at Naomi, at Lily, at a 7-year-old girl in a plaid school dress with a gap-toothed smile and a pink backpack and a pocket full of strawberry candy. And she said the words with the patience of someone explaining something obvious to someone slow. Use the service stairs. That's what they're there for. The lobby did not gasp. It did not move. It simply stopped. The way a room stops when something has been said that cannot be unsaid, when the air itself seems to recognize that a line has been crossed, that everyone present will remember, and no one will forget. Lily looked up at her mother. She did not fully understand what had just happened, but she felt it. And that small, quiet feeling landing in the chest of a 7-year-old girl who still carried candy for sad strangers, was the thing that none of them knew yet would change everything. Naomi Carter did not raise her voice. This was the thing that people who underestimated her always miscalculated. They expected volume. They expected the performance of anger, the raised pitch, the trembling hands, the eyes filling with the kind of tears that could be dismissed later as oversensitivity, as overreaction, as proof that she had never really belonged in a place like this to begin with. They expected her to give them something they could use. She gave them nothing. She looked at Charlotte Ashford-Wells with the same expression she used when a pipe burst at 3 in the morning and someone was screaming at her through the phone. Steady, present, and completely unmoved by the noise. "My daughter," she said, and her voice was so calm it cut. "Will use the same elevator as every other person in this building." Charlotte tilted her head. The small, practiced tilt of a woman who had spent decades using patience as a weapon. The performance of reasonableness deployed specifically against people she had already decided were beneath reason. "I have lived here for 11 years, she said. "I know how this building operates. There are standards. There are expectations. And quite frankly," she paused, letting the pause do its work, "the lobby is not a waiting room for staff children." "She is not waiting," Naomi said. "She is with me. I am the building administrator. And there is no policy, not one, that restricts her from this elevator. Charlotte smiled. It was the smile of someone who had never needed policy on her side, because she had always had something more powerful than policy. Surely, she said softly, you understand the difference between what is written and what is appropriate. And there it was. Not a rule, not a regulation, not anything that could be challenged or appealed or brought before anyone with authority to judge it. Just the quiet, ancient insistence that some people knew, without being told, where they were and were not meant to go. That some bodies, in some spaces, were not unwelcome exactly, just incorrectly placed. Like a piece of furniture that was perfectly fine on its own, but simply did not suit the room. Naomi opened her mouth. She did not get the chance to speak. Because the lobby changed. It did not change loudly. There was no dramatic entrance, no doors thrown open, no announcement of arrival. He was simply not there, and then he was. The way a change in weather is not there and then is. The way you do not notice the temperature dropping until you are already cold. Kang Joon-ho stood 12 feet from the elevator. He was still. The particular stillness of someone who had learned, at a cost most people could not imagine, that stillness was the most accurate form of attention. Two men in dark suits stood a half-step behind him, neither of them looking at anything specific, both of them aware of everything. He held a slim, black leather portfolio at his side. His neck tattoos caught the chandelier light, the dragon coiling up toward his jaw, the old Korean script running beneath it, like a verse from something that had not been written down for anyone else to read. He was looking at Charlotte. She felt it before she turned. The way you feel a door open in a room behind you. Not from sound, but from the shift in pressure. The sudden awareness that the space you occupied a moment ago is no longer only yours. She turned, and the smile stayed on her face for approximately 2 seconds before her body quietly decided it was no longer appropriate. "Mr. Kang," she said. The warmth in her voice was instantaneous and immaculate. The warmth of someone who had been performing warmth for so long they no longer noticed the performance. "I didn't realize you were—" "I heard you," he said. 2 words. Flat. Final. The verbal equivalent of a door closing. Charlotte recalibrated instantly. "I was simply explaining to your administrator that there are certain standards of—" "There is no such policy." He did not say it loudly. He did not need to. The sentence arrived the way a fact arrives, without apology, without negotiation, without any interest in whether it was convenient. "I wrote every policy in this building," he continued. "I approved every standard. I reviewed every clause of every lease currently active in this tower." A pause so brief it was almost not a pause at all. "What you described does not exist." Charlotte's jaw tightened. 1 millimeter. Barely visible, but visible. "Perhaps I misspoke," she said. "What I meant was simply that children in the common areas can be disruptive for other residents. I'm sure you understand the concern." "I understand," he said, "that you pointed at a child." The lobby held its breath. Charlotte's mouth opened. Joon-ho did not wait for it to close. Not at the elevator, not at the space. At her. His eyes moved, briefly, deliberately, to Lily, who was still holding her mother's hand, watching him with the open, unguarded curiosity of someone who had not yet learned to be afraid of powerful men in expensive suits. Then his eyes moved back to Charlotte. "I want you to be precise about what you did." It was at this moment that Lily did the thing that no one in that lobby, not Naomi, not Wesley, Not the two men in dark suits who had seen things in their careers that would make most people's hands shake. Expected. She let go of her mother's hand. She took 3 small steps forward, her unicorn keychain swinging gently against her backpack, her gap-toothed face tilted upward toward the tallest person in the room. She held out her hand. In her palm, a single strawberry candy in red cellophane. "You look sad," she said, with the complete authority of someone for whom this observation was simply a fact, requiring a practical response. "Candy helps." The room did not breathe. Kang Joon-ho looked at the candy in the small, dark hand extended toward him. And then he did something that none of the people in that lobby, not even the 2 men who had worked beside him for 11 years, had ever seen him do in a public space. He bent his right knee to the marble floor. Slowly, completely, without hesitation, until he was at her height. He looked at her for a moment that lasted longer than it should have and shorter than it needed to. Then he took the candy. "Thank you," he said quietly, in a voice that had briefly become something other than what it usually was. Lily smiled the smile of the missing tooth. And somewhere behind this stillness of Kang Joon-ho's face, something moved. Something old and private, and not meant for lobbies or audiences or the sharp, fluorescent memory of public spaces. He stood. He put the candy in his interior jacket pocket, over his heart, and he turned back to Charlotte Ashford-Wells with eyes that had not changed, and a mouth that had not changed, and a stillness that was now, if such a thing was possible, even more absolute than before. Charlotte Ashford-Wells had survived things. She had survived a divorce that was supposed to destroy her, the kind of divorce that gets whispered about at charity galas and dissected over lunch at places where the waiting list for a table is longer than most people's marriages. She had survived the slow migration of her social circle toward younger, newer, more financially dynamic versions of herself. She had survived the quiet retirement of her name from the columns that used to print it regularly, the gradual replacement of her photograph with photographs of women who had not yet learned that the city had a way of cycling through people like seasons. She had survived all of it by holding on to the one thing that had never been taken from her. The penthouse. 39 floors above the street, above the noise, above the particular indignity of being ordinary. The apartment was not just an apartment. It was evidence. It was the physical, marble-floored, floor-to-ceiling windowed proof that whatever else had changed, whatever else had been quietly subtracted from the life she had built, she was still the kind of person who lived at the top. And now the man who owned the top was looking at her like she was something he had found at the bottom. "My contract," she said, and her voice had found a new register. Lower, tighter. The voice of someone reaching for authority because charm had stopped working. "Is ironclad. 11 years of tenancy. 11 years of on-time payment. I have rights in this building that predate your ownership, Mr. Kang, and I would strongly suggest 90 days. She stopped. He had reached into the black leather portfolio. He removed a single document, white, clean, carrying the Kang Capital Holdings letterhead in discreet gold print at the top. And he placed it on the reception desk without looking at it, the way you set down something you have already finished thinking about. "Your lease expires in 90 days, he said. "It will not be renewed." The document sat on the desk between them like a verdict. Charlotte stared at it. Then she looked up, and the thing that had been held carefully in place behind her eyes for the last several minutes finally began to slip. Not into sadness, not into remorse, but into something rawer and less controlled than either of those. The desperation of someone who has just watched the last solid thing in their world begin to move. "You cannot do this," she said. "You cannot evict a tenant of 11 years over a misunderstanding in a lobby. I will call my attorney. I will file—" "You are not being evicted," he said, with a patience that was somehow more devastating than anger. "Your lease is expiring. I am choosing not to renew it. These are different things. Both are entirely within my rights as the property owner." "This is retaliation," she said. "This is personal." "It is a business decision," he said. "I make them every day." "Over a child." Her voice cracked slightly on the word, not with emotion, but with the particular incredulity of someone who genuinely could not locate the logic. "You are doing this over a child in a lobby. Do you understand how that sounds? Do you understand what people will say when they hear—" "I know exactly what I am doing," he said, "and I know exactly why." He picked up the portfolio. He straightened his jacket. And then he turned, not away from her, not toward the elevator, but toward Naomi, and he looked at her for a moment with an expression that was not warm and was not cold, but was something precise and deliberate. The look of a man making sure that what he was about to say would be understood correctly. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "you have my apologies. Not on behalf of this building. On behalf of the fact that this happened inside it." Naomi held his gaze. She did not say thank you. She did not deflect or minimize or perform the particular kind of gracious humility that women in her position were expected to produce when powerful men decided to be decent. She simply nodded. Once. Measured. The nod of someone who understood the difference between gratitude and acknowledgement. "I appreciate that," she said. He nodded back. And then Charlotte said the thing she should not have said. Later, in the weeks that followed, in the quiet of her own apartment, while the city moved below her with complete indifference to her situation, she would not be able to explain what made her say it. Panic, perhaps, or the specific blindness of someone who had spent so long inside a certain kind of certainty that they had lost the ability to see the edge of it until they had already stepped over. She said, "You are throwing away an 11-year relationship with a paying tenant. For what? For them?" The word landed in the lobby the way words land when they reveal something the speaker did not intend to reveal. Not with a crash, but with a clarity so sharp it almost had a sound. For them. Joon-ho stopped. He turned back slowly. The two men in dark suits had gone very still in the particular way that people go still when they recognize a specific kind of danger and have been trained to wait for instruction. He looked at Charlotte for a long moment. His voice, when it came, was quieter than it had been at any point in the conversation. "Choose the next word carefully," he said. It was not a threat. It was something more serious than a threat. It was information. Charlotte said nothing. The lobby said nothing. Even the orchids on the reception desk seemed to hold their color a little too tightly. Joon-ho looked at her for 3 more seconds. Then he looked at Lily, who was back at her mother's side, holding Naomi's hand again, watching the tall man with the neck tattoos with the patient, open expression of a child who understood that something important was happening, even if she could not yet name what it was. He looked at the child for exactly as long as he needed to. Then he walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the 38th floor, and stood with his back straight and his hands at his sides as the brass doors opened, and he stepped inside, and the doors closed behind him. And Charlotte Ashford-Wells stood in the marble lobby of the building she had lived in for 11 years, with a document on the reception desk and 90 days left of everything she had been so certain was permanent. Wesley, at the front door, looked straight ahead. The florist arrangement of white orchids did not move. Naomi looked down at Lily. Lily looked up at her mother. "Is she going to use the service stairs now?" Willie asked, very quietly, with no malice and complete sincerity. Naomi pressed her lips together. It took her a moment. "Come on, Buck," she said finally, her voice catching somewhere between exhaustion and something that was not quite a laugh, but was related to one. "Let's go upstairs." They stepped into the elevator together. The doors closed, and for the first time in 6 years, Naomi Carter rode the main elevator of the Haneul Tower without calculating whether anyone was watching. The 90 days passed the way significant things often pass, not slowly, not quickly, but with the particular weight of time that knows it is being counted, each morning arriving with the quiet insistence of a calendar page that cannot be turned back, each evening settling over the Upper East Side with the indifferent elegance of a city that had watched 1,000 people lose 1,000 things, and had never once adjusted its skyline in response. Charlotte Ashford-Wells spent the first 30 days certain it would be reversed. She called her attorney on the same afternoon the document was placed on the reception desk, before she had even returned to the penthouse, standing in the elevator with the Birkin pressed against her chest like armor and her phone already at her ear. Her attorney, a man who had navigated her divorce with the precision of a surgeon and the discretion of a priest, listened carefully, asked 3 questions, and was quiet for a moment that told her everything before he said anything. "Charlotte," he said, "a landlord declining to renew a lease is not eviction. It is not retaliation under any statute I can apply here. It is a property owner making a legal business decision about his own asset." "He did it publicly," she said. "He did it to humiliate me." "He did it in the lobby of his own building," her attorney said, "in front of witnesses who watched you tell a child to use the service stairs." The line was quiet. "I would not pursue this," he said, gently but without uncertainty. "I would begin looking for apartments." She spent the second 30 days looking for apartments. Manhattan, as Joon-ho had noted with the calm accuracy of someone who knew exactly what he was saying, was difficult. The buildings that matched what she required, the address, the floor, the particular altitude of living that she had come to understand as her natural habitat, had waiting lists, or board approvals, or prices that required a liquidity she was no longer entirely certain she possessed. The money from the divorce settlement, which had seemed inexhaustible in the year it arrived, had developed a horizon. Distant still, but visible now in a way it had not been before. She looked at apartments on the 40th floor of a newer building 3 blocks east and told the broker the finishes were inadequate. She looked at a corner unit on the 32nd floor of a building on Park Avenue and said the light was wrong. She looked at a penthouse in a building she had always privately considered slightly beneath the Haneul and did not call the broker back. The third 30 days she spent packing. On the morning of the 91st day, the moving van arrived at 7 a.m. Naomi Carter was already at her desk. She had the checkout paperwork prepared, the inspection forms, the deposit reconciliation, the final utility transfers, everything organized in the precise and thorough manner that had defined 6 years of her work in this building. She had not asked anyone to be present. She had not mentioned to Wesley or to Cecilia or to any member of her staff that this was the morning Charlotte Ashford-Wells was leaving. But they were there. Not in a group, not arranged in any way that could be called deliberate. Wesley was at the front door, which was where Wesley always was. Cecilia was in the east corridor, which was near enough to the lobby to see. Two members of the maintenance crew were doing something near the service entrance that did not urgently need doing at 7 in the morning. They were just present. The way people are present for things that matter even when no one has said out loud that they matter. Charlotte came through the lobby at 8:47. She was dressed impeccably. This was the thing about Charlotte Ashford-Wells that was, in its way, the most honest thing about her. She would not give the building the satisfaction of seeing her diminished. The Chanel was pressed. The pearls were fastened. The Birkin was on her arm. The Louboutins were on her feet. Her hair was done, and her posture was straight, and her face carried the expression of someone who had decided, as a matter of principle, not to feel what she was feeling in any place where it could be observed. She crossed the marble lobby. She passed the orchid arrangement, white, fresh, changed just that morning because it was Thursday. She reached the reception desk. Naomi stood and extended the checkout folder. Charlotte took it. She opened it. She reviewed it with the focused attention of someone looking for something to contest, some error in the accounting, some detail that had been handled incorrectly, and found nothing, because there was nothing to find, because Naomi Carter did not make errors in paperwork and had not made one in 6 years. Charlotte closed the folder. She looked at Naomi, and for a moment, a long, unguarded moment of the kind that slips through even the most carefully maintained composure when the composure has been under sustained pressure for 90 days, something moved across her face that was not quite an apology and not quite recognition, but was somewhere in the territory between them. The expression of someone standing at the edge of understanding something about themselves that they are not yet prepared to fully enter. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She set the folder on the desk, picked up her Birkin, and walked out of the Haneul Tower for the last time. The door closed behind her with the soft, expensive sound of a well-engineered mechanism doing exactly what it was designed to do. Wesley looked straight ahead. The lobby held its breath for one more moment. Then it exhaled and resumed being a lobby, and the city outside continued with complete indifference, and the orchids stood in their arrangement exactly as they had stood every Monday and Thursday for as long as anyone currently present could remember. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, a cream-colored envelope arrived on Naomi's desk. No return address. Heavy paper, black wax seal. Inside, a single page on Kang Capital Holdings letterhead. She read it once. She read it again. The promotion was real. Director of Operations, a title that carried with it not just a salary adjustment, but a restructuring of her entire role, a formal acknowledgement in writing of everything she had been doing without the title for years. At the bottom of the page, below the official language, below the signatures and the effective date, there was a line added by hand. She recognized that it was not written for her to respond to. It was written because someone had needed to say it. She knew the name of the elevator. She should have known the name of the person who keeps it running. Naomi put the letter down on her desk. She sat with it for a while. Not analyzing it, not planning what came next, just sitting with the specific and unfamiliar feeling of being seen completely and correctly by someone who had not been required to look. Then she picked up her phone and called the school. That same afternoon, on the 38th floor, Kang Joon-ho sat at his desk as the city arranged itself in the windows behind him, in the particular golden gray of a late October afternoon in New York. His assistant had come and gone. The day's business had been completed with the usual efficiency. The Haneul Tower was fully occupied, or would be once the penthouse was prepared for its new tenant, a young architect from Seoul who had been on the waiting list for 14 months and who would, Joon-ho suspected, Never once think to ask who kept the elevator running. He reached into the interior pocket of his jacket. The strawberry candy was still there, the red cellophane slightly creased now, the candy inside intact. He had not opened it. He was not entirely sure why. He set it on the desk in front of him and looked at it in the way that a person looks at an object that has stopped being an object and become something else. A marker, a coordinate, a small red point on the map of a life that had continued past a place where he had sometimes wondered if it would. He thought about a girl who had been 6 years old, who had also, in her way, offered things to people who looked sad, who had not lived to be 7. He did not think about this often. He had built, with considerable deliberate effort over 8 years, an entire architecture of discipline designed to ensure that he did not think about this often. But the architecture had a door, and sometimes, rarely, in specific and unpredictable moments, the door opened, and he stood in it for as long as he needed to, and then he closed it again and went back to work. He picked up his phone. He dialed a number he called rarely but never forgot. It rang twice. A woman's voice answered, the administrator of the memorial where his daughter was buried, a woman who had long since grown accustomed to the occasional calls from this particular number, calls that came without pattern and without explanation, calls in which the man on the other end sometimes spoke and sometimes simply stayed on the line in silence for a while, before hanging up without goodbye. "I just called to say hello," he said, in Korean, quietly. The administrator said hello back, gently, the way you speak to someone you do not fully understand but have learned to receive. He stayed on the line for a moment. The city moved in the windows. The candy sat on the desk. Somewhere 40 stories below, in an office with a provisional nameplate made of cardboard and permanent marker, a woman was on the phone with her daughter's school, saying, "Yes, I have something to tell her. Can you call her to the phone?" Her voice carrying the particular lightness of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time, and has just, unexpectedly, been allowed to set it down. Joon-ho listened to the silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, very quietly, to no one who could answer, "She gave me candy." He let that sit in the air of the 38th floor for a moment. Then he hung up, put the phone down, picked up the candy, and this time, slowly, without ceremony, in the privacy of a room where no one was watching and nothing needed to be performed, he opened it. The smell of artificial strawberry filled the quiet air. He sat with it. Outside, the city continued. Inside the Haneul Tower, the elevator moved between floors, steady, reliable, unnamed, carrying people up and down through the sky, as it had every day for years, as it would continue to do long after all of them had gone, tended by hands that most of its passengers would never think to thank, and a few, from this day forward, finally would. Eli was 9 years old, and he already knew what it feels like to walk into a room and have someone decide who you are before you open your mouth. You probably know that feeling too. Except in relationships, that judgment doesn't come from a stranger in a showroom. It comes from someone who says they love you, someone who uses your trust as access, someone who makes you doubt what you clearly saw, clearly felt, clearly knew. If you are a Black woman over 45 and you have ever sat inside a relationship waiting to be seen for who you truly are, there is a 30-day reset created for you. Not to make you hard, to make you harder to confuse. Scan the QR code on screen right now, or go to the pinned link in the comments, because you never had to prove anything. You just needed someone who could finally see. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been in a room where someone looked right through you? Not because you were invisible, but because they had decided, before you ever spoke a word, that you didn't belong there? And have you ever witnessed a moment when someone unexpected, someone you never would have imagined, was the one who finally said, "Enough"? Because sometimes dignity isn't defended by the people we expect to defend it. Sometimes it takes a stranger. Sometimes it takes a child with a piece of candy and no fear in her eyes. And sometimes justice arrives not with noise, but with a single document and 90 days of silence. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, justice, and the quiet power of doing what is right, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click Join to become a part of our community and help the channel.